I've been working out a little bit.
Yeah, you're looking good. Nice and jacked.
Yeah. I so me and my homie, we go work out on we several times a week, but Monday and Thursdays we try to max out on the bench press. And yeah, Thursday I put up 320 one
Oh
time.
man, 320.
Yeah.
That's what time I wake up to go for a run, if that counts.
Oh, I'm
320.
still asleep then.
Oh,
I'm
it's so
still
good to see
asleep.
you though. You're working out, so I know you said you max out. Hopefully, you're getting plenty of rest in between and feeding the body, taking care of the body.
Try my best to do that. Definitely have changed the diet a little bit. Um, just eating a lot less carbs, at least simple carbs. Eating a lot less, bread, processed things like that. Um, I do eat oatmeal, but the steel cut oatmeal, my wife makes it in the Instapot.
I
Man, that
got you. Yep.
stuff's so good. Like your taste buds start to change,
Mm-hmm.
when you start eating certain foods. Like, for example, we don't drink sodas in the house for the most part, and we drink sparkling water. There was a time my dad came up
So
here.
you're bougie. I just drink right from the tap.
My dad came up for Thanksgiving and we gave him one. He was like, "Well, you trying to kill me?
I bet.
Where's the sugar? Where's the taste? You trying to kill me?"
Trying to kill me. Yeah, it's funny stuff. I'm just messing with you. It's just funny because at home, like, I just drink water and I don't really care. Like honestly, like hands down, Baltimore City's got good water. I don't even care what people say. I'll drink it right from the hose, tap, doesn't matter.
Yep.
And my wife and the girls, they tend to. I mean, we have a Brita, right? Like nothing significant. But they live by it. Like we got to make sure it fills up and
Yep.
it shows overnight, and that's how they drink it.
So
It
you're
doesn't.
the bougie one.
No, because I just drink right from the tap, man.
No,
Like
well,
I don't, I don't put it in.
I guess, yeah. The folks in
No,
your house, though, I
no,
guess
they're bougie, yeah,
they're
man,
bougie. Yeah.
yeah. Like if and it's so funny because it's the same exact water, but if I were to put the water from the faucet in, it's like they're like, wait, there's something different. So,
Oh, they can taste it.
uh, I don't know. I just give me some water. So
Yeah.
I did want to say hi to everybody who's joining us. This is episode 4. Last time we met, we talked about gratitude and the importance of waking up in the morning and just being thankful for what you do have. And the last couple weeks, I've made it a point before the day starts, as the day comes to an end, trying to find the things to be grateful for. And I know podcasts are weird because, like, current events aren't always current when people are listening to it.
Right.
But with the state of affairs, with the recent act of gun violence in the school and being an educator, understanding as a parent, I have all these different views and emotions that surround the topic. But to be thankful for a day that, we get to come home to our kids, like those things continue to resonate. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to kind of start off and I mean, we're good friends. So like, I know that you wake up and you're grateful for what you get to experience and just being able to wake up. I thought offline though, you said something that was really powerful that I wanted to circle back to. You said, ultimately, even when everything else is stripped away, like you still have God in your corner, right? And
Hmm.
that in itself is enough. So I just wanted to, just kind of circle back to that and get any lasting impressions you had about that topic before we move on to number 4.
Everything could go away and just, you would question God, but at the same time, you have God, right? It's interesting. So I was having actually two conversations throughout the course of, since we last met. And one was a friend of mine. He was telling me how he was driving down the highway behind a certain vehicle, and then he kind of went around the vehicle, and later he noticed that that vehicle had dropped an entire like granite counter out of the back of their vehicle. So it was like he was at that moment, he was like, man, I'm blessed. Right. And it's just kind of interesting that, you know, like at that moment, anything could have happened. He could have stayed behind the vehicle and that counter top would have dropped out, dropped out and hit his car. Or he had to make some type of maneuver and, anything could have happened to him. But he's just kind of in that moment. He's like, man, God loves me, because it's, everything could be gone. I'm right here. And God's got me. The other thing was God loves his kids. That's something I remember, at all the time. So regardless of what we have or what I don't have, it's just God loves, his children, especially when you keep focus on him. I was listening to the Sermon on the Mount, because my family verse is Matthew chapter 6. That's like our family verse, which is kind of just dead smack dab in the middle of Sermon on the Mount, which is Matthew 5-7. Within that Sermon of the Mount, Jesus talks about it's easier to put a camel through the eye of a needle than for a wealthy person to get into heaven. I was reflecting on that, and a lot of the perception of that nowadays is that rich people, it's bad to be rich. What happened was people were trying to buy God, right? People were trying to say, I'm here with my gold, or I'm here with my expensive furs, or I'm here with this, and this is what gets access to God. What God says is, I just want your heart, right? I just want just your heart, right? And, just kind of, circling back on how that just having God is enough, right? And it's kind of the flip of him just saying, I just want you. God doesn't want our riches, despite us trying to get riches and things like that. God wants our heart. And if we, and when I'm saying everything can be stripped away, I know we have God in our corner, that's all really that matters.
Something that I have been taught over time is that, there was a time in religious history where, people were to come in church or synagogue and pay a certain amount of money. I mean, now we call it tithing, right? But like tithing now is just like what you can give. You like, give
Yep.
whatever you can, right? But different concept, because there were different religious leaders who would use people's guilt and desire for forgiveness to like purchase themselves in. So it's not just about the person themselves trying to buy in. It's that combination of that and religious leaders that were askew and astray, right? And just to kind of circle back before we get into the new quote, I work with this lady who she had an accident at home back in May, and she missed our last 6 to 7 weeks of school and had to recoup during the summer, and came back day one of this school year. She was telling me her story just the other day. Basically, she said, her husband's like a loud snorer. It was over the weekend. She knew she got to get a good night's sleep. So she said it was like 2 a.m. She decided that she was going to go downstairs. She has like like a Stanley or some kind of water cup by her bedstand, and she said, I took my nice quilted blanket, and I had my cup of water with me and my phone, and I was going to go down in the basement because we have like a guest room. So we're going to go downstairs, go to this guest room, and just kind of sleep. She had a terrible fall down the steps. Like something had happened, and she didn't break anything, but the way that she landed on the top part of her, the bottom end of her spine, she had like this huge bruise. Like she was showing me pictures and talking to me about it, and like sitting was comfortable, laying was comfortable. Like it was just like a terrible contusion, and it required a lot of like rest to heal, which is why like the doctor had signed her out for like 3 months, right? And as she's telling me the story and she's getting herself worked up, she's like, as she's like reliving it, because even now she still has a bruise, right? And she said, but I could have fallen at the top of the steps and not at the bottom of the steps, right? The way I landed, if I would have landed on the one corner of the step, like 2 or 3 inches up, she could have been a paraplegic, right? She
Wow.
could have fell and hit her head and could have died bleeding out before her husband even knew that she had woken up in the middle of the night, right? So she was like, even amidst that, even as she was going through the recovery and she's sore and she's on medicine and she's seeing doctors because now they're talking about like physical therapy and like
Yep.
the steps to like improve, she just grounded herself in knowing that, this isn't great, right? But there are so many ways that she was
Yeah.
blessed that granite top didn't come and hit her, right? That she
Yeah.
didn't, break her neck, break a part of her spine. Luckily, she got through with no fractures, right? Like just one
Yeah.
of those things. And so it's just like, even in the midst of this suffering and this pain, she just felt blessed and a level of gratitude. Like she could have, gone into like a shell of, why is this happening to me?
Yep.
That kind of mentality. And I think that's allowed her to recover well. And it was just like one of those interesting stories that kind of grounded us here. And
Yep.
it was just so funny because this is just like a perfect segue into the quote for today, right? Like I told you before, I just kind of shuffled the deck, kind of like a deck of cards, and
Yep.
pulled one. And like the one that came up today, I was like, bank, like, because this is going right into her story and stuff that we
Yeah.
talked about around gratitude. And I was like, this is such a good follow-up quote. I'm just glad that we got to unpack it with whoever's joining us today. Let's go ahead and read the quote and get ready for some questions. I got them lined up for you
All
today.
right, here we go, man.
All right. Because I'm currently reading just a side note. I'm reading How to Think Like Socrates. We'll link it. I believe it's by a gentleman named Robertson. It's like digging into who Socrates is based on any historical documents that are around, and this idea of like Socratic questioning and Socratic seminars and like how we dig into things. And so
I'm
I'm
your
going to ask them
experiment.
questions. That's right. I'm going to try to answer less and ask more, right? And kind of get ahead. So we'll see. I tend to talk too much, so we'll see how it goes. All right. So our quote today for Seneca, or from Seneca rather, is, "What need is there to weep over parts of life? The whole of it calls for tears." And so I'm not going to set you up. I'm going to kind of tell you what I've been thinking about before the questions start coming left and right at you. So one thing that immediately comes to mind is we were talking about gratitude. And here is this idea around suffering, right? Like we all suffer. It is a universal truth, right? And I'm not sure of any religion or philosophy that would debate this. Like if you look at Buddhism, right, it's one of the Four Noble Truths. The first one is about we all suffer, right? In Christianity, we have the idea of like there's going to be troubles and suffering in this world, but I've overcome the world, right? Like we've got, in most dogmas or philosophies, we have this idea, and Stoicism is no different, that to be a human is to make mistakes and to suffer, right? And so this whole conversation that I want to kind of gear us towards today is around this idea of, okay, what is suffering? Is it dangerous to like live in your suffering, or is it more dangerous to avoid the concept of suffering, knowing that it is a universal truth, right? Knowing that every single one of us in the cosmos that we can label and identify, we all suffer. And before I turn it over to the questions, the one thing I kind of want to kind of get you kind of framing around a little bit is we have gotten into this mode and this modality of comparing constantly. It doesn't matter. It's we're comparing wealth and we're comparing physical fitness and we compare intelligence and we compare, whatever it is, right? Fill in the blank. But we even do it to suffering. Like my suffering is worse than your suffering, right? If I'm experiencing a certain way, or opposite, my suffering has nowhere near as much as you're going through, right? And so we even down to suffering, we somehow or another make it a measurable, quantifiable scale where we feel like we need to either be validated or validate someone else based on how they deem to be suffering, right? And so just kind of think that through as we start to unpack this. So I'm going to start with the very, very basic question. What do you think Seneca means by this entire quote, specifically the phrase, "The whole of it calls for tears"? So what are you thinking about the quote and that part specifically?
Well, first, I probably should study a little bit more Seneca as a result to kind of get a little bit more context, so to speak. But um, when you think about this from a philosophical perspective, it's like the more you learn and the more questions you ask, the more you realize you don't know, and how um, sad it could be, right? Or you could be, if you're going to focus on an emotion, or because weeping generally comes from sadness. Tears, we kind of have that connotation of sadness. It's life is short, right? We know that one. There's going to be hardships within it. We all die at the end. In the grand scheme of the entire existence of the world, right? We think about there's billions of people on the planet right now, how there's been billions of people, how much we don't know. And, from that perspective, yeah, it's our existences are pretty pathetic. So that's, it's, yeah, it's a sad story. But I actually think from looking at this, I do think it was more. I think he's being more, I would say, sarcastic in this quote.
Yeah, I when I think about this, I think I've been using this term lately about two sides of the same coin, right? It like
Hmm.
this is some image that has just been in my head for a couple months now, but you know, moderation and temperance, the middle way, right? The thing in the middle, like most ways through life, it's grounded in you can find contentment if you understand this balance.
Yep.
Because when I read that part of the quote, I think, okay, tears, but without tears, you can't really have smiling either, right? Because they're both high energy around emotions.
Hmm.
And if you're only always happy, at some point, that loses the power. The reason we can be joyful is because we also know what it feels like to be sorrowful, right?
Yep.
The reason we are able to cry is because we know how tough it is, but you also know that at some point you'll be able to smile, right?
Yep.
And so it's the same coin, just two different sides of it. And so when I see the whole of it calls for tears, I think that initial response that you had, like the idea of like, man, this is pathetic, right? Like it is so we could be people who have like major depression issues, right? People that that need to unpack this stuff. I can see how you're almost quote unquote allured into getting into that point where, oh, I mean, hell, what's the point in living? Is all if all I'm doing is
Yep.
crying, right?
Yep. Yep.
But I think what he's kind of digging at here is that, yeah, life is tough, but guess what? It's also there's also joy in it. There's also that
Mm.
silver lining in it. And also you might feel like you're alone, but we're all in this, right? We're all dealing with it. So
So you're saying the tears are a high energy event, right? So on both sides, right? So like you could have tears of joy, tears of sadness, like they kind of express both ends of it. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that energy that you have, like the way that I interpret this, right, is that I mean, think about when we cry, like we cry when you are like overwhelmed, right? But like we cry when we're really, really emotionally sad, or like, or, birth of a baby, people cry, right? Like, oh my goodness, like I have cried at my father's funeral, but I have cried at my daughter's birth, right? And
Yeah.
so it's not the tears in themselves, it's the energy that's related to it, right? And like if you think about what's the point of like this podcast, right? What's the point in a lot of things that we've been talking about is being content and finding that centerpiece. And
Yep.
being content is understanding that you're going to cry for both reasons.
Yep.
And by the way, any gentlemen that are out there, I'm just letting you know. I mean, it took me a long time to learn this about myself. Not a big crier, but there is nothing wrong with crying, right? It's an emotion, right? It's an emotion, right? It is, if you're, and the thing is, if you're not like authentic with yourself and giving yourself that space to release this, it's going to be released somewhere else in some
Yeah.
other form. So I just want to do that like little plug there. overall, do you believe that life is inherently sorrowful the way the quote is read or suggests?
I'm gonna stick to my guns on this one. That this is representing some level of sarcasm. I think it is addressing that some may see life as overly sorrowful, and it's just kind of calling to question. If you're going to cry and just kind of hold on to that, then just cry the whole life, right? Why don't you just cry your whole life? Because the whole thing is sad, right? Just like you said, there's experiences that we have in life, right? And crying and happiness, these are part of the experience. I think the challenge oftentimes and with people is that we try to hold on to that particular moment. There is some benefits to feeling sad, right? And this, there are benefits to that. And oftentimes it's because attached with sadness, you want people to feel sorry or sympathy for you. So that's a level of attention seeking. And so but there is some benefit from a Maslow hierarchy of needs type of approach, right? That there's a benefit to hanging on to the sadness. If that's the only emotion or experience you're holding on to, just you know keep crying, because the whole thing, and we all out of here at the end anyway. So
That's right.
but but I think it is to point out, maybe it was addressing that sadness or sorrow was prevalent, or maybe he was just in that space kind of seeing a lot of sadness. I had to again do a little bit more research on Seneca, kind of in context of this quote. But overall, like I said, I think this was just an element of sarcasm, because he could say just like you mentioned earlier, he could say the opposite, right? We could input this quote on the inverse. What need is there to laugh over parts of the house life when the whole thing is funny, right?
Yep.
Right? we could invert it and say the same thing.
It's funny, as you're talking, I'm thinking about. I mean, you've got a real good grasp on the gospel, and but Marcus Aurelius has been in meditations had written something around this idea, and I know you'll probably be able to give me Bible verse and stuff like that, but this idea of like ripping your sackcloth, right? Like those people who put on a display. Like, yes, there is time to mourn, right? There is something, like you said, there is a pro-social purpose for this, right? Crying is a natural state, and there is some things that are absolutely necessary to exhibit this behavior, right? And there is a time to tear the sackcloth and to like just mourn, like you are just grieving, right? Like,
Yep.
like there are things that are happening in this world that you see a picture of a mom and you're like, I get it. Like you need to be on display. Like this is heart-wrenching to watch, right? But there's also a time when it stops.
Yeah.
Right. That after a while, to your point, now you're attention seeking. Now you're doing it to get adulation or somebody to adore you, and you're living off of the pulpit, you're making a spectacle. So I do think it kind of hits at that point. Have you ever experienced a moment in your life where this quote, thinking back and reflecting, it felt particularly true, that even if it's sarcastic or even if it's kind of playing to that idea of the middle, is there a time when you felt that, what am I crying for? This is something that everybody has to deal with. We all deal with suffering.
I don't know if I have particular examples, but I know, kind of growing up just with the self-esteem issues, just, no one likes me. And even sometimes, to this day, like, I think different from a lot of people, right? And sometimes it's when you can't, when you always can't articulate your idea or what you see, or what you're seeing is so plainly to you, but you can't like really get other people to see it. I guess I'm saying the same thing with that, but it's like I could say like the sky is blue, right? But me telling you that it's not translating until you get to see it. And sometimes it's frustrating well, nobody understands me, nobody gets me. Like it's wants to put you in this corner. Like, man, this is just sad, right? This is
Mhm.
just, it's frustrating. What helps, I guess, kind of get over that is that, recognizing one, I don't understand everybody else either.
Fair, fair,
you know,
fair. Barely understand myself sometimes.
you know, but also too, there have been instances where people finally come around, and I was just kind of been impatient. But if I kind of focus on like nobody understands me or just trying to hold on to that idea, it's sad. And I do notice like getting into your corner, pouting, um, being sad about it. It is an attempt to get the attention that you were looking for from the big idea, right? So when you have this idea and this vision and you want people to see it and people aren't, you kind of go into the or at least me, I would go into the sad woe is me, but it's again for the attention, right? Just to try to call for attention.
Yeah, and good on you. Like self-reflection, right? We talked about this at the very beginning, outside of the podcast, and that is the idea of reflecting on our own existence and our own growth and our own maturization process, and to be able to take a step back and understand, like, oh man, like I see it for what it is, right? I see
Hmm.
me being in this corner, instead of pouting and having a whole tantrum. Like even when I close up, I'm like, wait a minute, like what am I really? Let's take a second. Let's take a pause. Let's take a beat. What am I really upset about? Right? Am
Yeah.
I upset about what I'm actually going through, or am I upset about not getting the attention, or feeling
Yep.
as if I'm being neglected? Like, what is it? And like, try to see somebody else's perspective, right? Which is very hard to do when you're
Yep.
emotionally attached to some situation. I
Yep.
thought I wanted to unpack one idea real quick that you had said. This is a commonality that I hear from children, but I hear from adults as well, and this idea of like, no one understands me,
Mm.
right? Like that idea of like no one. You talking about a billion people on this planet, whatever it is, and none of us experience what you're feeling, right? And so I kind of just want to take a second and kind of go through like, when you get that urge to be like, no one understands me, do you ever like self-correct and be like, that's not true? Like no one, like not one person.
And this is an interesting question, right? Because it's one of those things that are true and not true at the same time. You are one of a billion people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So no one thinks like you. No one processes information the same way you do. No one sees the things you see in the way you see them. So that is true. No one else thinks like you. However, as human beings, we do have the ability to communicate. Part of that communication is to be able to get to understand one another. You know how the getting on the same frequency is kind of the analogy to that, right? Because you could be off by a couple megahertz, or you could be off by the waves could be off by a little bit, so you understand each other in times. At certain points, they kind of intersect if you're off a little bit, but then when you're on the same frequency for an idea or for a thought, that's when you can get it. But it's just the way people communicate. And it's interesting. I'm sorry, it's going to sound like I'm rambling a little bit, but because
I
i've
know.
i've had this very kind of
I've
idea of,
triggered you. Oh
yeah,
no.
yeah, yeah.
Podcast is over.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because, yeah, no one understands you, no one is going to think like you, but we have the ability to communicate. And part of getting you to see what I see in that moment oftentimes lies within the questions we ask, right? Because the whole, even Jesus talk about seek and know for yourself, or the Bible talks about seek and know for yourself, right? On my other podcast, Just the Guys, we talked about you cannot tell the truth. It's impossible to tell the truth because the truth just is. I could, we can pull things out to help you see the truth, right? But until you know what it is for yourself, like I can't tell you what it is. And also that's why previous languages, it was images. It was all it was image. It was, hieroglyphics was a form of imagery, and the stories were told from the images, and that's just kind of helps people see. I understand that no one's going to think like me, but at the same time, I have to understand, like, there's a way to communicate my message or what I'm feeling, or understanding what they're feeling in a way, um, that we can eventually end up on the same wavelength for that moment. Once that moment passes, we're no longer there, right? And we're, still kind of in our ways of thinking or what have you. But there is a lot there, man, because it's true and untrue at the same time. No one understands me, and that's going to be true. But we can get on the same page, whether it's kinetically, some people say, like, psychopathically, what have you. Because if you think about it, when we didn't have language, when we didn't have words to use, like, how were we communicating?
Yeah, and two thoughts. One, I mean, anybody who has a spouse understands you don't have to say something or write something for you to know what that look looks like, right? Like,
Hmm.
you know what's going
Yep.
on. So that's one. The other thing that I kind of wanted to talk about real quick was, as you're talking, like, I'm having like these neuro, I don't even know, blasts, right? They're just going off, the synapses are firing, and I'm thinking, okay, I've read this several times over the last couple months. The same person never stands in the same water, right? Ever. Like, because you are different. Not just the stream and the water is different, right? But you, when you step into the water, are a different person than you were before, right?
Yep.
And so when I think about this, like, even down to no one understands me, I think there is some kind of internal conflict that we experience, because what bothers me today might not bother me tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right. And I think for those of us who like have difficulty finding contentment, right, and getting themselves back to a place of peace, which, right, like, peace made simple, right? Like, if we're trying to get to this point, like, we also have to understand that we don't see the same thing the same way.
Yeah.
Right. So how can we possibly ask someone else? Because, you could say something one day, I'm in a good mood, I had a good sleep, dog's fine. And, like, I'm like, we talked about before about the joking piece, right? Like,
Yep.
sometimes I'm that's not going to bother me at all. Right.
Yep.
And you could say
Yep.
the same exact thing, but if you change, and even if I still got a good night's sleep, but like, just biologically, right? Like, chemically, like something's off. I could just be more emotional, right?
Yeah.
And it could hit different, it could land different. So, like, I'm not even the same person. So to hold somebody accountable that's not in your head at that precise moment, because I could be like, it's I think it's funny because both are around spouses, but it's like, if you're with your spouse, that, like, them, like, if you become intimate, right, and you really know them, you understand, like, wait a minute, what is going on? Because, like, just yesterday we just talked about this, and now I get a different vibe from you, right?
Yep.
And so it's kind of negotiating that piece too. That, like, I hate to say it, but not even myself can understand myself. Because, I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but there are sometimes I'm like, I don't. Why do I feel like this? Like,
Yeah.
nothing
Yeah.
happened. Like, why? Like, why? Like, what is going on? So the quote. Now, I know we talked about it being sarcastic, right? But do you find this quote to be liberating? Do you find it depressing?
This was a tough one, man. I don't find it depressing, right? I definitely don't find it depressing, but I can see how it can be found depressing. Yeah, I don't want to say, like, liberating unless you're, like, really, really looking, like, digging deep into it. Um, because in life, man, there, like, when it's look at what needs to weep over parts of life, right? What parts of life would you be weeping over? Poverty, um, other people dying, tragic events. I don't know, man. Now I'm really thinking about it too. We had the mass shooting event happen in, what is it, Minnesota this week, and that's a part of what we experience of life, that happens. It's sad, right? And man, this is biblical right here, because why are we crying over that evil when Even the Bible says darkness rules the air. The whole of our existence, like everything, there's it, it's easy to to succumb to the darkness, right? It's easy. Like if you let if you didn't tend to your garden, what happens? Weeds grow in, right? If you don't tend to your mind, um, it's the negative or the worst thoughts that tend to prop up. Idle hands are the devil's playground. When you don't tend, um, to the hearts and minds of young people, again, just the worst things can surface. So it's that parts of life. What are we weeping over, right? And just thinking about, like, if what are the parts of life that we weep over, and it's generally surrounding some type of loss, tragedy, and oftentimes evil. Most times evil. And then when you think about all of life, the whole life you're battling evil. Your entire, especially from a Christian perspective, like we're warring with evil, right? So if you're going to cry over this evil, we should be crying the whole time. Actually, this I'm starting to think about it now. It's more liberating because it's like we're called to stand up and be a light against the darkness, right? So if if I'm going to cry over this, that means I'm letting my light go out. I don't want to do that, right? So don't let your light go out. Stay shining. Don't let your light go out over this particular evil. Keep it shining, right? Because your entire life, your all life, like your whole existence, you're fighting against this evil, whether it's in your face or not. So to me, that makes it a little bit more liberating, because it's saying the light, keep your light shining, even when you're experiencing these moments, these parts of life. Keep your light shining, and because your whole life calls for you to keep your light shining.
I love it. You're just so articulate, and you have so many good thoughts to come to the table and unpack it. And I'm going down this journey with you as you're talking and kind of thinking it through. Because at first I was like, well, this is kind of like a not a softball question, right? But one that if you take time to really unpack, and there's a couple things that I made note of while you were talking, and I'm just going to give them all to you, and then however you want to unpack them, right? Because these
Yeah.
are just kind of random thoughts that came to me. One, it was, in maybe it's Corinthians, I want to say, but this idea of like there's a season for everything, right?
Yep.
And sadness and tragedy, unfortunately, there's a season for this, right?
Hmm.
But the inverse is true also. You're going to get through it, right? And this idea that, like, it's just like an analogy that came to mind. But I was thinking when you were talking about your light and being engulfed in this darkness and not allowing it to go out, right? To still continue to shine. In my opinion, we would almost, as a human, expect for our light to flicker,
Hmm.
but just don't let it get snuffed out.
Yep.
Right. And so that is the liberation piece that, like, if you are content and you understand, like, yes, it is, life is impermanent, right? Like we've talked about this, like it's going to, the only thing that's constant is change. And the only thing that we know is that we die, right? Everything else,
Yep.
we know we have suffering, but that suffering will come at an end, right? And regardless of all the pain that we go through. And it's that idea of, the people who are truly content are those that can um, recognize when they are suffering,
Yep.
but understand that, the proverbial light at the end of the tunnel, that like if you don't allow your light to be snuffed out, that you keep it at least flickering and simmering, that you can withstand, what life is throwing at you.
Yep.
So that was one. The other thing that I kind of made this note was that, and as a father, right? It's and this is being said with all love and respect. I'm not diminishing anything that people are going through today, and everything is on lease, right?
Hmm.
Our own body is on lease. Like we don't own anything. And I
Yep.
think as I read the Stoics, I think, what do they keep coming back to? Do you want to be content? Because to be content, um, you have your your morals, your ethics, right? You have your virtues. That is it, right? Because everything else can be taken away. How you respond. Now we can argue, like we've talked about a little bit. We can define courageous as something. We can what's wise. We can debate the minutia in that. But if you stand and hold firm to this idea around your virtues and your character and your morals, that is the only thing that's not on lease, because that's the one thing that you can
Yeah.
absolutely decide on until you're no longer here, right? And
Yep.
so part of me with this idea around stoicism is this idea of non-attachment, right? Like, and what do we become attached to? Well, the easy stuff that we see, right? Like, wealth. Some of us are more attached to our wealth than is, I won't say socially acceptable, because that's not true. It's more like, if you go bankrupt tomorrow, how bad is your life, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's people why when Wall Street acts a certain way, bad things happen, right? And
Yep.
and we just become so attached to our wealth as our defining characteristic, right? And that's
Yep.
what we put all of our energy in. And as a family person, right, as somebody who, I would classify myself as somebody who tries to be a good husband, a good father, right? That if somebody say, "Who are you?" and I think about the things that I bring to this world and I present in this world, family's up there, right? My faith,
Hmm.
my family, what I do for a career because I'm passionate about it. But like my job, I know can be taken away at a moment's notice, and even though I would be upset, of having to be pushed out of a field that I am passionate about, I know deep down that I could bounce back. I could be resilient. I could find
Yep.
something else. I've got other
Yep.
talents, right? Um, but when it comes to our family members, those that are the dearest to us, that is something that I work on. Other philosophers, quote, not quoting, but pointing out, like Marcus Aurelius, again, in meditations, like part of his nightly habit at a time when the mortality rate was off the charts.
Yeah.
He would look at his kids and imagine them dying, because it just, in case it happened, he was
Yeah.
preparing himself not to have them, right? And we now have modern medicine the way that we do, so we try to avoid those kind of thoughts, right? Because it's uncomfortable, and I don't want to imagine outliving my children. But that idea of the why they talk about not being attached to externals is because we really have no control over it. Doesn't mean
Absolutely.
that we don't cry. It doesn't mean that we don't mourn. It doesn't mean that our light is going to flicker and diminish a little bit when we're going through it. But I think this idea that suffering is part of life, and
Yep.
we are on lease, and everything is on loan, at some point it's taken away. So it's good to acknowledge it. And I think it kind of plays on that idea. If that two sides of the same coin, if you can acknowledge that, then the moments that you do have with them, then they're all the more sweeter. Now we're crying out of joy, like, oh my goodness, my kids are home. Oh my goodness, like it's not to make us not have feelings. It's to
Yep.
kind of moderate that.
Yeah. You're defining the experience, right? You just like you said, the attachment to stuff is just as real as the attachment to a particular experience. And when we know those emotions, that experience is on loan as well, right? It does create another level of, I would say, peace. But that's why when when people realize they can't like sway you emotionally, they call you stoic. Oh, you're just so
Yeah.
stoic about it, so stoic. But so it does kind of represent a level of detachment from being, I would say, emotionally manipulated by other people, but you are detached from holding on to the emotions. So you just allow these things to happen. You feel what you feel, process those emotions, and then continue and move on.
I think I've said this on the podcast before, but it just keeps coming up. My dad passed away in November of 2012. So now we're starting to get up there in years, right? It's not year one, not year two, right? We're talking a decade plus. But it's little nuggets of truth that like he like was planting. If we talk about biblical stuff, it's the seeds that are being planted, and at some point, hopefully they grow fruit, right? And
Mhm.
I've kind of taken over that mantle and like done the same thing with my girls, and that is, one thing that he used to say to me like religiously, and it's such a simple thing, but it's just like it is what it is. And my
Yep.
mom would get so upset and be like, "What do you mean it is what it is?" And she could go on this whole tangent. She's just very emotional, like that side of the family, very Polak and just like very like just in it, right? Like just emotionally driven. And she's like, "What do you mean this is?" And my dad was like, "I can't change it, right?
Mhm.
No amount of worrying is going to change it. This is the situation, like you said about the truth. I can't
Yep.
explain it to you, but this is what the reality is. Once you see it and you see it for what it is what it is. And it's the perceptions that we give it, it's the values that we give it that are going to either lead you from being in a place of calmness where he could go to sleep regardless of what's going on. And my mom, who's like now she's like 2-3 days into not sleeping because she's like in anxiety over something, right?
Yeah.
And I just think it's interesting when you think about suffering. It's the same thing. Like I'm not trying to sound crass. We all go through suffering, and sometimes we need to cry, and we need to cry like everybody else. Like that's just part of the ocean of tears, right?
Yeah.
But like it is what it is. Like this is what it is. And once you get to the other side, then your light will shine again.
Yeah. Transparency, moment of transparency here. I think that is one of the things that does annoy me is when people don't see that it is what it is. Well, like, what do you want me to do about it?
Yep. Yep. Yep.
I can't do it. Uh, like,
Hundred
hold on.
percent.
It is what
And
it
how
is. That annoys me.
and how annoying and how annoying is it to other people who they're like, "What do you mean it is what it is?"
Yeah.
Right? It's like annoying on both ends.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, it just is. I can't do
it
anything
just
about it,
is.
man. It's just like when the sun rises. I didn't tell it to come up in the west. Like
That's
I
right.
can't do that. It comes up in the east. It is what it is.
It is what it is. It's raining tomorrow. I don't know what you want me to do. Like it is what it is. It is what it is. I will admit though, the human emotion comes out. I'm not trying to speak this into the universe and jinx myself with it. Now this is about suffering, but it's like one of those things that you can laugh at later. It's such a small anecdote, but I think it kind of goes to what we've been talking about. It was a Sunday. If people who know me, I don't do much on Sundays, right? Sunday
Mhm.
is like my reset for the weekday. It is like I'll wake up, I'll go for a walk, I'll take a shower, I'll go to service, I'll go to the grocery store, I'll get gas for my car for the week. I get home, we're going to just kind of like chill,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
A couple years ago, I was taking my daughter somewhere after like the church and the grocery store. And I said, I needed to go run one more errand. Day's going to be done. And I finished it. And I said, you know what? Let me go ahead and get gas. Cause like, I'm a weird person like this. If my gas tank is under a quarter tank gas, it's not a good thing. So like,
Yeah.
I'm like, no, I'm going to go, I'm at a half tank, but I'm going to fill it for the week. I was just being proactive here. So I
Yep.
go to the gas station, and I mean, not a mechanic, whatever the plug is that keeps the air in your tire, right?
Yep.
So I uncap it, and as I'm trying to uncap it, so I can, because I put gas in the car, but then I was like, oh, you know what? My tire's a little low. It's getting cold. Let's make
Yeah.
sure that everything is up, right? So I start uncapping my tire, and the stem breaks off in my hand. And
Oh
as
wow.
and right, and not only is it in my hand, this is like in December, so it's cold and it's raining, and we're not getting snow yet, so it's not like below 32, but it's like that 38, 39. If you're from
Yeah.
Baltimore, you know what it is. 38, 39, freezing cold rain is what's going
Yep.
on. So I got this stem in my hand, and I just and remind you, like I'm only getting it filled because like the temperature, the
Yeah.
tire needs to be inflated, right? And I could have just left it alone, but no, I was trying to be proactive. I got the stem in my hand. It's raining, and I'm watching the tire deflate in front of me.
Yep.
And I'm just like, no, not a flat tire. Not only that, but like the stem's in my hand. So then, so it's one of those things. Like I end up calling my brother, make sure my daughter got a ride where she needed to go. My
Yep.
brother's over with me. He's like, I'll try to help you. Like, dude, I don't know what you can do because the stem's in my hand. And then
Yeah.
and then he pulls my dad's line. He's like, it is what it
Yeah,
is.
look
I
at
was like,
Yep.
oh damn it, it is what it is. Right?
Not this now.
But not now, not now. Like this is crazy because what it is 4 hours to wait until a tow truck comes so that I can get
Yep.
it towed because I gotta get new. Like all of a sudden, my Sunday, and that's the
Yep.
thing about planning, right? Like I was so ready for the day. And
Yep.
I was like, I can't. The whole day was ruined, right? Like it's one of those things. Like I had a hard time resetting. By the time, I mean, this is probably going on around 11, 12. By the time everything was handled, it's like 4:30, 5 o'clock. But I was in a mood the rest of the day. I get home, I was
Mhm.
like, I don't even want to eat dinner. Like I don't
Yep.
want to eat. I don't want to talk. This day has been crap. This was supposed to be my rest day, right?
Yeah.
And so it goes back to this, like, I mean, in hindsight, does it really matter?
Mhm.
Right? Like that moment, like if you would have called me, I'd be like, dude, I can't talk right now. Like I got a
Yeah.
fucking stem in my hand, right? Like it's like one of those things. Like I don't know what you want me to say. It's raining. I'm cold, and I'm the one that did it. I broke it by accident. And if I would have just waited until the weather got a little bit warmer, and it's Baltimore, because so it could have been that afternoon, right?
Yeah.
Like 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 if I would have just been more patient, but I was trying to do all these things, and then best laid plans. It just didn't work out that way.
Yep.
3 years later, I'm laughing. I think it's a funny story, but it
Yep.
just tells you, like, that moment, like my emotions got so out of hand. Like I wasn't rude to people, but I was just irritated, right?
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
and it's just one of those things that I didn't allow myself to, like, once I got home and I refused to eat dinner because I'm a spoiled baby. I was like, no, no, day's ruined. I just want to go to
Yep.
bed and start over tomorrow. But, Monday I woke up and was like, new day. My
It is
tires
what it was.
fixed, right? It was
Yep.
what it was. So I just think as far as going back to like how have we experienced this stuff, I think that level of suffering, even when we kind of anticipate it for ourselves. I experienced my dad fighting cancer, and then I experienced this broken, stem, and my initial response like is just over the top in both
Mhm.
situations, right? And so I just think it's good to be to recognize, and hopefully now that I've grown, like I said, this 3 4 years ago, I'm continuing to
Yep.
grow, and like hopefully now I'll be able to take a deeper breath and just be like it really is what it is.
Mm. What it is.
It is what it is. In what ways might accepting life's inherent suffering change how we treat others in a world that we live in, where we're talking about being kind and compassionate, caring, selfless in today's climate, all things considered? What ways might accepting life's inherent suffering change how we treat others?
I think that alone will help people be a lot more empathetic, especially when you realize other people aren't living in like La La Land, or everything is just peachy on their end. When you realize like everyone has a level of suffering, whether it's right now or some type of past event, uh, like everyone deserves that same level of grace. Um, so it's just a more, to me, it's one of those things that helps make you human. You're not better than anyone else. No one else is better than you. It's an equalizer. So recognizing that other people go through the same processes. They have highs, lows, um, and also people may not be where you are on certain journeys. Like we're all at different levels, varying stages of um, realization, right? I'm just calling it that. Uh, when you have that, when you understand that, it just makes us more human, more empathetic, more compassionate, and quite frankly, I think when we start leading with that, not bringing up the sorrow, not bringing up the sad times or anything like that, not using those as an icebreaker, but leading with that as in the back of your mind, saying, "Hey, this person could be having a bad day. Am I going to be here to make it worse? How can my approach to a situation or to a person, um, not bring tears to them, right? And tears hypothetically, but how can I help, you know, make a more positive experience in their life, despite where they are?"
Well said. I think about the conversations I've been having with people very recently, um, and sometimes to me, um, the scary part, or a scary part to me, is when people are suffering, but are outwardly masking it for the sake of face or the sake of the community that they're in. To that, and just in case anybody's listening or watching, like, I'm going to talk about suicide for a minute, but there are people who, how often do you hear people um, receive a note, or sometimes not even a note, and the person who has committed suicide would be the last person that you would think,
Mm-hmm.
because like they're the loudest in the room, they're laughing. I'm thinking like Robin Williams, for instance, right? I know
Yeah.
2 or 3 different people, not close friends of mine, but people that I knew, they're close friends, so like a couple removed. But the 2 or 3 people that I know of specifically who have committed suicide, each of them had left people behind that did not know that they were suffering,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
That they masked it to that extent. And, that is to me, that's a frightening thing, because when somebody's going through something like that, who knows if anybody's words could help, who knows what kind of demons people are, who knows
Yeah.
if that light has been snuffed out and that's it. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't matter what you would have said, but to have no idea what somebody else is thinking or feeling. Right. And
Yep.
so that's one end. But I also think about those people who, they don't mask it, and they show you their true cards. They put their cards on the table, and face value what they feel like they're able to externalize and show you. And when I'm interacting with people who I know are going through something, my initial response is, I won't say I want to give you pity, right? I'm not pitying anyone, but you use the
Mm-hmm.
word like grace. Like, I give grace and space, right? Like,
Yep.
you're going through this. Like, I know, just because you've explained this to me, or it's visible in your demeanor, or what you're saying to me, that like you need some time before I respond a certain way, because it's not going to be received well, because you are going through something.
Yep.
And since we're not mind readers and we don't know, we almost have to err on the side of caution here and know that we are all suffering. It's just whether or not somebody is visible or not visible. And I think that's around that idea of empathetic responses to people. If you just go in knowing, like, at the core, more likely than not, since we all suffer at some level all the time against the principalities of darkness, that at some
Mm-hmm.
point we just need to look at it and acknowledge, whether they're smiling or they are crying, that most likely they're suffering something.
Yep.
And if you have that interaction with someone, I think you give them a little bit more grace, and you're able to understand that, some of the words that seem hurtful, some of the actions that take place that you could feel disrespected or slighted, or, something. I think it allows you to kind of um, take a pause and not respond in that initial gut reaction.
It's interesting because, I mean, a lot of what we want to do is use our words too, right? Because like when I'm thinking about what you're saying, what comes to my mind is, well, what do I say to this person, right? Or what am I how am I supposed to say something to this person? It's not always what you say, right? And oftentimes acknowledging someone may be suffering may not be just in what you say. It may just be in your presence, right? Just being there. I was at a work event a couple of weeks ago. Around a whole bunch of people, man, and this is one of those things I where just I compare myself to others. Kind of being like, I see people that are like real charismatic, and I'm like, man, it'd be cool to be like that guy. Like, is it the front of the room? They know all the dance moves and that stuff, and I'm black, but I can't dance. So
I'm white and I can't dance. Nice stereotype.
you know,
It is what it is.
it is what it is. But you
I
see
can
these
watch
guys.
somebody dance. Yeah,
Yeah, me too. I'm pretty good at it. But you kind of think about what is my purpose, and especially like in big audiences, you see people, oh, this guy he knows how to kind of control a room or what have you. Or this guy over here like makes the best jokes. He's always kind of knows what to say, get the people going. And then like I'm there, like I'm usually a quiet one watching. I'll speak when I need to, but it's like I'm just watching it, and but people like having me around for the most part.
yeah. You're good people. Good people.
but it was interesting because we were with a group, and we like this whole group. It was like six of us, kind of just like rolled together the entire time. The young lady came up to me and said, "Man, like, um, thank you for being in the group." She said, like, this was before we left. Is like, thank you for just just like, I thought you guys have a great group, and I thought you was like really just kind of valuable because you always like provide a calming presence. Like you always just have just have that calm demeanor. Like things just are like whatever it is. Like let's just let's go. And that's one thing I just kind of appreciate. I was like, wow, here I am, and it's crazy because that week I was doing that thing where I was comparing, like what is my purpose? Why am I here? Like I feel like I'm not adding anything to any value to to the group. I always feel like I need to add value. um, it was interesting because she came up and said that to me. It was like, wow, like that is very, very interesting. And I said that to say, right, in context of what we've been talking about, when you're giving people grace and space, right, it's not always in what you say to them. Sometimes it's just, hey man, I'm here, or just just being there and talk about being a good person. That's kind of like a spiritual thing, right? You're just being a good person. And then even further, when we talked about weeping over parts of life, right? And that weeping, like, don't like putting your light out, like just being present and letting your light shine. It's not always in the words you use, right? It's the presence in who you are. We all could be going through our things. Just being present, like that's part of being present. And am I letting my light shine? Like, am I just doing that? And just kind of circling back on the conversation, weeping over parts of life. Why would we let our light shine, like light go out over these parts when the whole thing would call for our light to go out? We are supposed to let our light shine, not for just this moment, but for all, and for all people, and everyone we encounter.
100%. Just fascinating. You're one of my favorite people to talk to.
Man,
I
I'm
always
trying, man.
value you. I will say this as we wrap up. It reminds me of a biblical verse while you were talking. I tend to ask this in my daily prayers, and part of it is, give me the strength to be quick to listen and slow to speak. Slow to anger, to finish, right? But in this context, sometimes, to your point, being present and knowing which questions to ask is more important than what advice to be given, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if somebody is going through something, your mere presence, or your mere attentiveness to
Yep.
help them get through it. Because like you had said, sometimes it is about attention seeking, but attention seeking isn't always the negative connotation that we have. It can be,
Mm-hmm.
right? But the idea that sometimes people just need the right, whatever what right is, the right amount of attention to get them through something that's horrific,
Yep. Yep.
on some scale. And oftentimes, I found myself trying to be the person to give advice, and what I would think would be warranted advice. I don't really try to peek in there with, just my 2 cents. But if somebody's coming to me with an issue, I internalize it for a long time as, well, you're seeking advice. You're asking me questions, right? You're telling me, you're talking to me about it. But what I didn't hear was a question, right?
Mm-hmm.
I gave an answer to a statement,
Yep.
right? Which is sometimes, I mean, sure, I mean, sometimes people are giving you a statement and they want advice, right? But
Yep.
what I've found is if you just really do that piece about being an active listener and not worried about jumping into what you want them to do or how to think, or try to, for lack of better words, manipulate where they're thinking, but to really ease their suffering, it is that question piece. It is that, how can I help you? Right.
Hmm.
And as we're going through it today, what I've learned over time, and I'm going to continue to push myself to do this, and I would encourage other people, if you give people questions, the initial response sometimes is, I don't know what I need.
Yep.
But let it linger, that uncomfortable piece, because oftentimes if you give them the space, something's going to come out, whether it's something you can do for them or not. It's them going through their process and
Yep.
you're there for them. So back to what you're saying, sometimes it's not about advice, it's not about what I can actually do, my mere presence and checking in.
Yeah. Well, the cool thing about being present is that you'll see what to do. Right? When
Mm-hmm.
you let your light shine, like the light shining on what to do. Like when you're really truly just in the moment, present, it things just flow. And I notice times where I'm in my head, things just go to crap. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. But those moments where you're just present, where you just be, things they just go right, man. They just happen.
That's right. All right, so let's go ahead and close out. One more time, our quote for episode 4 was, "What need is there to weep over parts of life? The whole of it calls for tears." My friend, and anybody who's paying attention, listening, watching, thank you. Make sure that you comment. Make sure you reach out to us so we can interact with you all. Um, I would say, if we close this out, I pray that you don't need to suffer as we go into the next couple days before our next time together. Um, More than likely, though, like Seneca says, we're going to.
Yeah.
So hopefully you keep that light shining, um, and take our existence for what it is.
Make sure you like, share, subscribe to Peace Made Simple on YouTube and Instagram.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.